My name is Amelia. I'm 33 years old, and I used to believe that hard work and loyalty would always be rewarded. I spent the last 8 years of my life building something incredible from nothing. Little did I know that my greatest achievement would also become my most powerful weapon. It all started on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting in my small office at TechFlow Industries, watching the rain streak down my window while sipping my third cup of coffee. The building was buzzing with excitement because we were just 3 weeks away from revealing our revolutionary product to the world. After years of sleepless nights and countless failed experiments, we had finally created something that would change everything. TechFlow Industries wasn't always the giant company it is today. When I joined 8 years ago, it was just a small startup with big dreams and even bigger debts. The CEO, Robert Manning, hired me straight out of graduate school when nobody else would give me a chance. I was young, eager, and ready to prove that my ideas about artificial intelligence and data processing could actually work in the real world. Those early days were magical. Robert and I would work side by side, sometimes until 3 in the morning, trying to solve problems that seemed impossible. We shared pizza in empty conference rooms and celebrated small victories like they were Olympic gold medals. He treated me like family, always encouraging me to think bigger and dream harder. When I got married to my college sweetheart David 2 years later, Robert even walked me down the aisle because my father had passed away when I was young. But everything changed when Robert's daughter Jessica married Brandon Hartwell 3 years ago. Brandon came from old money, the kind of family that owned half the city and never let anyone forget it. He had perfectly styled hair, expensive suits, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Within months of the wedding, Robert made Brandon the vice president of operations, even though he had never worked a real job in his life. From day one, Brandon made it clear that he didn't like me. Maybe it was because I questioned his decisions in meetings, or because other employees came to me for advice instead of him. Whatever the reason, he started small. He would forget to invite me to important meetings or schedule team discussions when he knew I had other commitments. When I brought new ideas to the table, he would shoot them down immediately, only to present similar concepts as his own weeks later. The worst part was watching Robert change. The man who used to value innovation and hard work started caring more about family politics and keeping Brandon happy. When I tried to talk to Robert about Brandon's behavior, he would just pat my shoulder and say, "Give him time, Amelia. He's still learning the business." But I kept working. I kept innovating. I kept believing that my contributions would speak louder than office politics. And they did, in ways I never expected. 2 years ago, I made a breakthrough that would define my entire career. I was working on a project that everyone else had given up on, creating an artificial intelligence system that could predict market trends with incredible accuracy. The math was complex, the coding was brutal, and the testing never seemed to end. But I knew I was onto something big. After 18 months of development, I finally cracked the code. My system could analyze millions of data points in seconds and predict stock market movements with 94% accuracy. It was like having a crystal ball for the financial world. The prototype testing results were so impressive that Robert immediately approved full development funding. But here's the thing that nobody at TechFlow knew, not even Robert. When I filed the patent paperwork for my revolutionary system, I was going through my divorce with David. My lawyer advised me to use my maiden name, Amelia Rodriguez, for all legal documents to protect my assets during the proceedings. So when I submitted the patent application for my AI system, it was registered under Amelia Rodriguez, not Amelia Thompson like everyone at work knew me. The patent was approved 6 months later, making me the sole legal owner of technology that experts estimated could be worth over $800 million. I never corrected the paperwork because honestly, I forgot about the name difference. I was so focused on perfecting the system and preparing for our global launch that legal details seemed unimportant. As our launch date approached, the excitement at TechFlow reached fever pitch. We had already secured meetings with major corporations, and early investors were throwing around numbers that made my head spin. This was going to be the biggest product launch in the company's history, and my AI system was the star of the show. That's when Brandon started getting really nasty. He began holding daily strategy meetings that I wasn't invited to, even though they were discussing my own creation. He hired his college friends for important positions, pushing out longtime employees who had been with the company since the beginning. When I complained to Robert, he just said Brandon was bringing fresh perspectives to the team. The breaking point came last Friday afternoon. I was in the lab running final tests on the system when I overheard Brandon talking to his assistant in the hallway. He was laughing about how he planned to take full credit for the AI breakthrough once we went public. He called me just another employee and said that after the launch, he would clean house and get rid of all the dead weight from the old days. I felt my blood turn to ice. This was my life's work, my greatest achievement, and he was planning to steal it all while throwing me away like garbage. But I didn't say anything. I just kept working, kept testing, kept preparing for what I thought would be the greatest moment of my career. I should have seen Monday coming. I should have realized that Brandon wouldn't wait until after the launch to make his move. But I was so focused on the technical details that I missed all the warning signs. I didn't notice how he started excluding me from client calls, or how he began referring to the AI system as our company's innovation, instead of giving me credit. Monday night, I stayed late at the office to run one final system check. Everything was perfect. The AI was running smoothly, all the bugs had been fixed, and our presentation materials looked incredible. As I packed up my things around midnight, I felt proud and excited about the future. I had no idea that in less than 10 hours, my entire world would explode. Tuesday morning started normally enough. I arrived at the office at 8:30, grabbed my usual coffee from the break room, and headed to my desk to review the day's schedule. We had a big team meeting planned for 10 o'clock to go over final launch preparations, and I was looking forward to seeing everyone's excitement about our upcoming success. At exactly 9:06 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed Brandon's name, which was strange because he usually just walked over to my desk when he needed something. His voice was cold and businesslike, completely different from his usual fake-friendly tone. "Amelia, I need you to come to conference room B immediately," he said without any greeting. "Sure, I'll be right there," I replied, thinking maybe he wanted to discuss some last-minute changes for the presentation. "Should I bring the system reports?" "Just come now," he said and hung up. Something felt wrong as I walked down the hallway. Conference room B was the smallest meeting room we had, tucked away in a corner where nobody usually went. It wasn't the kind of place you'd hold important discussions about an $840 million product launch. The hallway seemed unusually quiet, and I noticed that several of my coworkers quickly looked away when I passed their desks. When I opened the conference room door, I found Brandon sitting alone at the small table with a single manila folder in front of him. He didn't look up when I entered, didn't offer me a seat, didn't even acknowledge that I was there for almost 30 seconds. The silence stretched uncomfortably as I stood there wondering what was happening. Finally, he looked up with that cold smile I had learned to hate. "Sit down, Amelia." I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap, trying to stay calm even though my heart was starting to race. "What did you want to discuss? Are there changes to today's presentation?" Brandon opened the manila folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table to me without saying a word. My eyes scanned the document, and the words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was a termination letter. "You're firing me?" I whispered, unable to believe what I was reading. "Effective immediately," Brandon said, his voice completely flat. "Your services are no longer needed at TechFlow Industries." I stared at the paper, reading the same terrible words over and over. "I don't understand. We're 3 weeks away from launch. This is my project, my system. Why would you—" "The company is moving in a new direction," Brandon interrupted. "We need people who can adapt to modern business practices, not employees who are stuck in legacy thinking." Legacy thinking. The words felt like a slap across my face. I had created something revolutionary, something that would change the entire industry, and he was calling me legacy. "Brandon, I built this system from nothing. I spent 3 years of my life—" "You were an employee doing your job." He cut me off again. "Everything you created belongs to TechFlow Industries. Your personal attachment to the project is exactly the kind of outdated thinking we're trying to eliminate." The room felt like it was spinning. I couldn't process what was happening. Does Robert know about this? Did he approve this decision? Brandon's smile got wider and nastier. Robert is fully aware of all personnel decisions. He agrees that it's time for the company to move forward with fresh leadership and modern perspectives. I felt tears starting to burn behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not when he was clearly enjoying every second of my shock and pain. I want to speak with Robert directly. That won't be necessary, Brandon said, pulling out another piece of paper. Here's your severance package. 1 month's salary, which is quite generous considering the circumstances. 1 month's salary. For 8 years of my life. For creating technology worth hundreds of millions of dollars. For building this company from a tiny startup into an industry leader. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand justice. But I just sat there, staring at the papers, feeling completely numb. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings. Brandon continued. Your access cards and company equipment need to be returned immediately. And of course, you'll need to sign this non-disclosure agreement to protect the company's intellectual property. He slid another document across the table. The NDA was thick and full of legal language, but the basic message was clear. I couldn't talk about anything I had worked on at TechFlow, couldn't share any information about the AI system, and couldn't work for any competing companies for 2 years. This is insane, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You can't just steal my work and throw me away like this. I'm not stealing anything, Brandon replied calmly. Everything you developed was created on company time, using company resources as part of your employment contract. It all belongs to TechFlow Industries, just like it always has. That's when I realized he had planned this perfectly. He was firing me right before the launch, so I couldn't be there to receive any credit or recognition. He was going to present my AI system to the world as his own achievement, probably claiming he had supervised the entire development process. And with the NDA, I wouldn't be able to tell anyone the truth about who really created it. The worst part was knowing that Robert had approved this betrayal. The man I had worked beside for 8 years, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who had promised me that loyalty and hard work would always be rewarded at his company. He had chosen his son-in-law over me without even having the courage to fire me himself. I signed the papers because I didn't know what else to do. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen, but I managed to write my name on all the required lines. Brandon watched me with obvious satisfaction, like a cat playing with a wounded mouse. Security is waiting outside to escort you out, he said, gathering up all the documents. I'm sure you understand that we need to protect our intellectual property during this sensitive time before the launch. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like rubber. Brandon, you know this is wrong. You know I created that system. You're stealing my life's work. He finally looked directly at me, and for just a moment I saw the real Brandon underneath all the fake politeness and business talk. His eyes were cold and cruel, and his smile was pure malice. Amelia, you were always too emotional about business decisions. That's exactly why you don't belong in the modern corporate world. Legacy employees like you just hold companies back from reaching their full potential. I walked out of that conference room feeling like I was in a nightmare. Security was indeed waiting for me. 2 guards I had known for years who couldn't even look me in the eye as they followed me to my desk. Word had apparently spread quickly through the office because the entire floor was dead silent as we walked past. My coworkers sat frozen at their desks, pretending to work while stealing glances at the woman being marched out like a criminal. At my desk, I mechanically packed my few personal belongings into a cardboard box. A coffee mug my nephew had made me in art class. A small plant that had somehow survived 3 years in the windowless office. A framed photo of me and Robert from the early days, both of us grinning proudly next to our first successful prototype. Looking at that picture now felt like looking at strangers from another lifetime. The security guards watched everything I packed, making sure I didn't take any company property. They even checked my computer bag and went through my desk drawers after I finished. It was humiliating and unnecessary, but I knew they were just following orders. They were probably as uncomfortable as I was. As we walked toward the elevator, I caught sight of Robert's office. The door was closed and his secretary wouldn't make eye contact with me. I realized that he was hiding in there, probably waiting for me to leave so he wouldn't have to face what he had done. The man who used to call me his most valuable employee didn't even have the courage to say goodbye. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt endless. I stared at my reflection in the polished doors, hardly recognizing the broken woman looking back at me. Just 30 minutes ago, I had been excited about presenting my revolutionary AI system to the world. Now I was being thrown out like garbage, with nothing to show for 8 years of my life except a cardboard box and a 1-month severance check. But as we reached the ground floor and the elevator doors slid open, something inside me started to change. The shock was wearing off, and underneath it I could feel something else growing. Something hot and powerful and dangerous. They had made a terrible mistake. In their rush to steal my work and get rid of me, they had forgotten one crucial detail. And when they realized what they had overlooked, it would be far too late to fix it. The security guards walked me to the front doors of TechFlow Industries, the building where I had spent the best years of my career, where I had created something amazing, where I had believed I had a future. As I stepped outside into the cold morning air, clutching my cardboard box, I made myself a promise. This wasn't over. Not even close. I walked to my car with my head held high, even though I felt like my world was crumbling around me. I set the box on my passenger seat and sat behind the wheel for a moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. Then I pulled out my phone and made a call that would change everything. Rodriguez and Associates Law Firm, the receptionist answered. How may I help you? I need to speak with Maria Rodriguez immediately, I said, my voice steady for the first time all morning. Tell her it's her cousin Amelia, and I need to discuss some very valuable intellectual property. Maria Rodriguez had been my cousin and my lawyer for over 10 years, but she had never heard me sound like I did on that phone call. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in her downtown office, telling her everything that had happened while she took careful notes and asked sharp questions that made me realize just how badly Brandon and TechFlow had messed up. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Maria said, leaning back in her leather chair. You filed the patent under your maiden name, Rodriguez, during your divorce proceedings. The patent was approved and is legally registered to you personally, not to TechFlow Industries. That's right, I confirmed. I was so focused on the technical work that I never thought to change the name on the patent after my divorce was finalized. Everyone at work knows me as Amelia Thompson, so they probably don't even realize the patent exists under a different name. Maria was quiet for a long moment, staring at the patent documents I had brought with me. Finally, she looked up with a smile that reminded me why she was one of the most feared intellectual property lawyers in the city. Amelia, they just handed you the biggest legal victory of your life. This patent makes you the sole owner of technology worth hundreds of millions of dollars. TechFlow Industries has no legal claim to it whatsoever. The words hit me like lightning. After hours of feeling powerless and betrayed, I suddenly realized that I held all the cards. So what does this mean exactly? It means that every time they use your AI system, they're violating your patent, Maria explained. It means that their entire product launch is based on stolen technology. And it means that when they go public with your system in 3 weeks, they're going to face the biggest lawsuit in corporate history. We spent the next 4 hours planning my legal strategy. Maria explained that we needed to move carefully and quietly. If TechFlow discovered the patent issue before their launch, they might try to delay everything while they developed workarounds or attempted to negotiate a licensing deal. But if we waited until after they had publicly launched the product and committed to major client contracts, the legal damages would be enormous. The key is timing, Maria said. We let them have their big moment. Let them announce the product, sign the contracts, make all their promises to investors and clients. Then we hit them with a patent infringement lawsuit that will destroy everything they've built. I left Maria's office feeling like a completely different person than the broken woman who had been escorted out of TechFlow that morning. I had power now. Real power. And I was going to use it to make sure Brandon and everyone who had betrayed me would pay for what they had done. But first, I needed to be smart about this. I couldn't let anyone know what I was planning. I had to act like the defeated former employee while secretly preparing to destroy the company that had thrown me away. It was going to be the hardest acting job of my life. The next 2 weeks were torture. I had to watch from the outside as TechFlow prepared for their big launch using my technology. I saw press releases announcing the revolutionary new AI system, but my name was nowhere to be mentioned. Instead, the articles talked about how Brandon Hartwell had led the development team in creating this groundbreaking innovation. Some stories even quoted him explaining the technical details of my own system, pretending he understood the complex mathematics and coding that had taken me years to perfect. The worst part was seeing Robert in interviews, proudly talking about how his company was about to change the world. He spoke about innovation and vision and the importance of having the right team in place. He never mentioned my name, never acknowledged that I had ever existed, never showed even a hint of guilt about what he had done to me. I wanted to scream every time I saw one of those interviews. I wanted to call the reporters and tell them the truth about who really created the AI system, but Maria kept reminding me to stay patient, to let them dig their hole deeper before we buried them in it. During those 2 weeks, I also learned some disturbing things about what was happening inside TechFlow. I still had friends there who were willing to share information, and what they told me made me even more determined to get my revenge. Brandon had indeed cleaned house after firing me. 3 more longtime employees had been let go, all of them people who had questioned his decisions or who might have known too much about the real history of the AI project. He replaced them with his college friends and family connections, people who had no real qualifications but who would never challenge his authority. Even worse, I learned that the AI system was having serious problems without me there to maintain it. The code was incredibly complex, and I was the only person who truly understood how all the pieces fit together. Brandon's new team was struggling to keep it running properly, but instead of admitting they needed help, they were just covering up the problems and hoping nothing would go wrong during the launch. This information gave me an idea that made Maria smile when I shared it with her. We weren't just going to sue them for patent infringement. We were going to let them launch a broken product based on stolen technology, and then we were going to watch their entire company collapse under the weight of their own incompetence and greed. The launch event was scheduled for a Friday morning at the downtown convention center. TechFlow had rented the biggest ballroom available and invited over 500 potential clients, investors, and reporters. They were planning to stream the event live on their website and social media channels, expecting it to be the defining moment that would transform them from a mid-sized company into an industry giant. I wasn't invited, of course, but that didn't stop me from watching. Maria and I sat in her office, streaming the event on her computer while we waited for the perfect moment to strike. We had already prepared all the legal paperwork, and Maria's team was ready to file the lawsuit the moment I gave the word. The event started exactly as I had expected. Robert took the stage looking confident and proud, talking about how TechFlow Industries was about to revolutionize the world of artificial intelligence. He introduced Brandon as the visionary leader who had guided the development of their breakthrough technology. The audience was clearly impressed, and I could see reporters frantically taking notes about what they thought would be the biggest tech story of the year. Then Brandon stepped up to the microphone to give the technical presentation. This was the moment I had been waiting for. He was about to present my life's work as his own creation in front of hundreds of witnesses with cameras recording every word. The legal evidence couldn't get any better than this. But as Brandon started talking, I noticed something that made my heart race with excitement. He was nervous, really nervous, and he was making mistakes. Technical mistakes that proved he didn't actually understand the system he was claiming to have created. He stumbled over basic concepts, mixed up important details, and gave explanations that made no sense to anyone who actually knew anything about artificial intelligence. I could see confusion spreading through the audience. These were smart people, industry experts who knew enough to recognize when someone was faking their way through a presentation. Brandon was digging his own grave with every word he spoke, and he didn't even realize it. Then came the moment I had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. Brandon announced that it was time for the live demonstration of the AI system. A massive screen descended from the ceiling, and technicians wheeled out a computer setup that would allow the audience to see the system in action. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brandon said with fake confidence, "prepare to witness the future of artificial intelligence." He pressed a button to start the demonstration, and for a few seconds, everything worked perfectly. The AI system began analyzing market data just like I had programmed it to do. Numbers and graphs appeared on the big screen, and the audience leaned forward with interest. Then the system crashed. Not just a small glitch or a minor error, but a complete, catastrophic system failure. Error messages started flashing across the screen, Alarms began beeping, and smoke actually started rising from one of the computer towers. The audience gasped. Reporters started taking pictures of the disaster, and Brandon stood frozen on stage like a deer in headlights. For 30 seconds, nobody moved. The ballroom was completely silent except for the sound of error alarms and the whirring of cooling fans trying to prevent further damage. Brandon stared at the smoking computer equipment with his mouth hanging open, clearly having no idea what to do or how to fix the problem. Finally, Robert rushed onto the stage and grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some minor technical difficulties. If you could please be patient while our team resolves this issue." But there was no team that could resolve the issue. I was the only person who truly understood the system well enough to fix a catastrophic failure like this, and I was sitting in a lawyer's office 20 miles away, watching their humiliation with pure satisfaction. The next few minutes were even more beautiful than I had imagined. Brandon's new technical team ran around frantically, pressing buttons and typing commands that only made things worse. More smoke started rising from the equipment, and someone finally had the sense to shut down the power before anything caught fire. The audience was getting restless. Reporters were asking pointed questions about what had gone wrong. Investors were looking concerned about the stability of the technology they had been promised. And through it all, Brandon stood on stage, sweating through his expensive suit, realizing that his moment of triumph had turned into a complete disaster. That's when I turned to Maria and smiled. "I think it's time." She nodded and picked up her phone. "File everything," she said to her assistant. "Patent infringement, technology theft, fraud, and everything else we discussed. I want the lawsuit served within the hour." As I watched the chaos unfolding on the live stream, I felt a satisfaction deeper than anything I had ever experienced. They had thought they could steal my work, destroy my career, and erase me from history. They had thought I was just another employee who would disappear quietly into the background. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. But the revenge I had planned was just getting started. The system failure was embarrassing, but it was nothing compared to what was about to happen when they discovered that they had been using stolen technology worth $840 million. And when the media learned the truth about who really created the AI system and how TechFlow had betrayed and fired their most valuable employee, the scandal would destroy far more than just their product launch. As I sat there watching Brandon try desperately to salvage his presentation, I realized that this was only the beginning. The real destruction was about to begin, and there was nothing any of them could do to stop it. Within 30 minutes of Maria making that phone call, everything changed. The lawsuit was filed electronically and served to TechFlow Industries while their disastrous launch event was still happening. I watched through the live stream as a security guard approached Robert on stage and handed him an official-looking envelope. The color drained from his face as he read the first page, and I could see his hands actually shaking as he realized what was happening. Robert whispered something to Brandon, who immediately stopped trying to fix the broken computer system and rushed over to read the lawsuit papers. The confusion and panic on Brandon's face was absolutely perfect. He clearly had no idea what a patent infringement lawsuit meant or how much trouble they were suddenly in. The audience could sense that something major was happening. Reporters started taking pictures of Robert and Brandon huddled together on stage, whispering frantically while technicians continued to deal with the smoking computer equipment. The whole scene looked like chaos, which was exactly what I had hoped for. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert finally announced, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Due to unexpected technical and legal complications, we're going to need to postpone the rest of today's presentation. Thank you for your time and patience." The ballroom erupted in confused murmuring as the audience started filing out. I could hear reporters asking questions about what kind of legal complications could interrupt a product launch, but Robert and Brandon had already disappeared backstage without giving any answers. Maria and I moved to the conference room where her legal team was monitoring news coverage and social media reactions. Within an hour, the story had exploded across the internet. Tech blogs were reporting that TechFlow's major product launch had been derailed by both technical failures and mysterious legal problems. Videos of the system crash and the smoking computers were being shared thousands of times, and everyone wanted to know what had gone so wrong. But the real fireworks started when Maria released our official statement to the press. She had crafted it perfectly, laying out the basic facts in a way that would grab headlines and destroy TechFlow's reputation. Today, our client Amelia Rodriguez filed a lawsuit against TechFlow Industries for patent infringement, technology theft, and fraud, the statement read. Ms. Rodriguez is the sole legal owner of the artificial intelligence technology that TechFlow attempted to launch today. She developed this revolutionary system over 3 years while employed at TechFlow and holds the exclusive patent registered under her maiden name. TechFlow terminated Ms. Rodriguez's employment 3 weeks ago in an apparent attempt to steal her intellectual property and claim credit for her innovations. The technology they demonstrated today, which failed catastrophically during their presentation, belongs entirely to Ms. Rodriguez and was being used without her permission. The media response was immediate and brutal. Every major tech publication picked up the story within hours. Former employee claims ownership of failed TechFlow AI system. Patent lawsuit rocks TechFlow Industries after disastrous launch event. Did TechFlow steal technology worth $840 million? The story had everything reporters loved: corporate betrayal, stolen technology, a David versus Goliath lawsuit, and dramatic video footage of computers literally smoking during a live presentation. It was the perfect scandal, and the media couldn't get enough of it. My phone started ringing constantly as reporters tried to reach me for interviews. Maria had coached me on exactly what to say, and I was ready to tell my side of the story. I spoke with 3 major news outlets that first day, carefully explaining how I had created the AI system, how TechFlow had fired me right before the launch, and how they had tried to steal credit for my work. I gave 8 years of my life to that company, I told one reporter. I worked nights and weekends to create something revolutionary, something that could change the entire industry. And they thanked me by firing me without warning and trying to pretend I never existed. But they made one crucial mistake. They forgot that the patent belongs to me, not to them. The interviews were picked up by news channels, podcasts, and social media influencers. My story was everywhere, and public opinion was overwhelmingly on my side. People love stories about hardworking employees being betrayed by greedy corporations, and this case had all the elements of a perfect revenge tale. Meanwhile, TechFlow was falling apart. Their stock price dropped by 40% in the first day after the failed launch. Major clients who had been ready to sign contracts worth millions of dollars were now backing away, worried about the legal uncertainties and technical problems. Investors were demanding answers about how the company had managed to base their entire future on potentially stolen technology. But the best part was watching Brandon and Robert try to defend themselves in the media. They held a press conference 2 days after the disaster, and it was even more satisfying than I had hoped. Robert looked exhausted and defeated as he faced a room full of hostile reporters. TechFlow Industries categorically denies all allegations of patent infringement or technology theft, he said, reading from a prepared statement. Ms. Rodriguez was an employee who worked on this project as part of a larger team. Any technology she developed was created using company resources and belongs to TechFlow Industries. But the reporters weren't buying it. They had done their research and knew that I held the patent in my own name. They asked pointed questions about why TechFlow had fired me right before the launch, why my name appeared nowhere in their promotional materials, and how they could claim ownership of technology that was legally registered to someone else. Brandon tried to answer some of the technical questions, but he only made things worse. He clearly still didn't understand the AI system well enough to explain how it worked, and several times he contradicted things he had said during the failed launch presentation. One reporter actually asked him to explain a basic concept from my patent filing, and he stumbled through an answer that proved he had no idea what he was talking about. The press conference was a complete disaster for TechFlow, but it was amazing publicity for my case. Videos of Brandon's confused responses went viral on social media, with people making jokes about executives who don't understand their own products. The hashtag TechFlowFail started trending, and memes about the smoking computers and stolen patents were everywhere online. Within a week, the legal pressure became overwhelming for TechFlow. Maria had filed for an immediate injunction preventing them from using my AI technology in any way. She also demanded access to all their internal communications about the project, their client contracts, and their financial projections based on the stolen technology. The discovery process revealed even more damaging information than I had expected. Internal emails showed that Brandon had indeed planned to take full credit for my work months before he fired me. There were messages where he joked about getting rid of legacy employees, and documents showing how he had systematically excluded me from meetings about my own project. Even worse for them, the technical investigation revealed that TechFlow had made numerous unauthorized modifications to my AI system without understanding how it worked. These changes had introduced critical bugs and security vulnerabilities that made the technology practically worthless. The catastrophic failure during their launch event wasn't just bad luck. It was the inevitable result of incompetent people trying to improve something they didn't understand. The financial damage was staggering. TechFlow had spent over $50 million preparing for the launch, including marketing campaigns, client meetings, and infrastructure improvements. They had signed preliminary agreements with major corporations worth over $200 million, all of which were now in jeopardy due to the legal uncertainties. Maria calculated that between the patent infringement damages, the lost business opportunities, and the cost of fixing their reputation, TechFlow could be looking at legal penalties worth over $500 million. For a company that had been valued at around $300 million before the scandal, this was a death sentence. But the personal satisfaction went far beyond the money. I was getting calls from other employees at TechFlow, people who wanted to share their own stories about Brandon's incompetence and cruelty. It turned out that I wasn't the only person he had treated badly. He had bullied younger employees, stolen credit for other people's ideas, and created a toxic work environment that had driven away several talented individuals. Some of these former employees were willing to testify in court about Brandon's pattern of taking credit for other people's work. Others shared internal documents that showed how he had lied to Robert about various projects and decisions. The picture that emerged was of a spoiled, incompetent man who had used his family connections to destroy a company that other people had built with years of hard work. Robert tried to reach out to me several times during this period, but I refused to take his calls. Maria handled all communication through legal channels, making it clear that any settlement discussions would need to acknowledge my full ownership of the AI technology and include significant financial compensation for the damage they had caused to my career and reputation. The media coverage continued to grow as more details emerged about the case. Business schools started using the TechFlow scandal as an example of how nepotism and poor leadership could destroy successful companies. Industry analysts wrote articles about the importance of properly managing intellectual property and treating valuable employees with respect. I was invited to speak at conferences about innovation, patent law, and workplace rights. My story resonated with thousands of other employees who had experienced similar betrayals at their own companies. I became an accidental symbol of fighting back against corporate injustice, and the response was overwhelming. But the most satisfying moment came 3 weeks after the failed launch, when I received a call from Maria with news that made me smile wider than I had in months. "Amelia, you need to sit down for this," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "TechFlow Industries just declared bankruptcy. They can't handle the legal costs, the lost contracts, and the damage to their reputation. The company is finished." I sat in my kitchen, holding the phone and trying to process what she had just told me. The company where I had spent 8 years of my life, where I had created my greatest achievement, where I had been betrayed and humiliated, was completely destroyed. And it had all happened because they had made one simple mistake. They had fired the wrong person. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we negotiate the purchase of TechFlow's remaining assets," Maria replied. "Since they can't pay the damages they owe you, we can buy their technology, their client list, and their office building for pennies on the dollar. You'll own everything they tried to steal from you, plus everything else they built." As I hung up the phone, I realized that my revenge was complete. Brandon had lost everything: his job, his reputation, his future in the tech industry. Robert had watched the company he built over decades crumble because he chose family politics over loyalty and fairness. And I had gone from being a fired employee with a cardboard box to the owner of technology worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But the story wasn't quite over yet. There was still one more chapter to write. One final twist that would determine what happened next. Because owning the technology was just the beginning. Now I had to decide what to do with the power I had gained, and whether my quest for justice would turn into something larger and more meaningful than simple revenge. The phone was ringing again, and I could see from the caller ID that it was going to change everything once more. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. But when I answered, the voice on the other end made my heart skip a beat. It was Dr. Sarah Chen, the CEO of Quantum Dynamics, the biggest technology company in the world. I had admired her for years as one of the few women who had broken through the gato ceiling gang in the tech industry, and now she was calling me personally. Ms. Rodriguez, I've been following your story very closely, Dr. Chen said in her calm, professional voice. What TechFlow did to you was inexcusable, but the way you handled it was brilliant. I'd like to offer you something that might interest you. She explained that Quantum Dynamics had been looking for exactly the kind of AI technology I had developed. They had a team of the world's best engineers, unlimited funding, and clients who were desperate for the market prediction capabilities my system could provide. But more importantly, Dr. Chen wanted to offer me something TechFlow never had: true partnership and recognition. I'm not interested in buying your technology, she said. I want to offer you a position as Chief Innovation Officer and a partnership deal where you'll retain partial ownership of your AI system while we help you develop it into something even more revolutionary. You'll have your own research team, unlimited resources, and full credit for everything you create. The offer was incredible, but I told Dr. Chen I needed time to think about it. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I was ready to trust another corporation with my life's work, even one with a reputation as good as Quantum Dynamics. That evening, I sat in my apartment looking out at the city lights and thinking about how much my life had changed in just a few weeks. A month ago, I had been a loyal employee who believed that hard work and dedication would be rewarded. Now, I was the owner of technology worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and one of the most powerful people in the tech industry wanted to be my partner. But the real change wasn't in my bank account or my professional status. It was in how I understood the world now. I had learned that loyalty without respect is worthless, that being kind and trusting doesn't protect you from cruel people, and that sometimes the only way to get justice is to fight for it yourself. I also realized that my story had become bigger than just my personal revenge. Thousands of people had reached out to me sharing their own experiences of workplace betrayal, stolen credit, and corporate injustice. My lawsuit against TechFlow had inspired other employees to stand up for themselves, and several copycat cases were already making their way through the courts. The next morning, I called Maria and asked her to set up a meeting with Dr. Chen. But first, I had one more piece of business to take care of. I drove to the TechFlow building, which was now mostly empty except for a few security guards and lawyers handling the bankruptcy proceedings. The parking lot where I used to arrive every morning, full of excitement and purpose, was nearly deserted. The sign with the company logo looked faded and sad, like a monument to broken dreams and wasted potential. Inside, I found Robert cleaning out his office. He looked up when I entered, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. He looked older than I remembered, with gray hair and tired eyes that showed the weight of losing everything he had built. "Amelia," he said quietly. "I wondered if you would come." "I wanted to see it for myself," I replied, looking around at the empty office where we used to plan the future of the company. "I wanted to understand how it all went so wrong." Robert sat down heavily in his chair and stared at his hands. "I made terrible mistakes. I let family politics cloud my judgment, and I hurt the best employee I ever had. I destroyed my own company because I was too weak to stand up to Brandon when I knew he was wrong. I had come here expecting to feel triumphant, to enjoy seeing the man who had betrayed me face the consequences of his choices. But instead, I just felt sad. Robert wasn't an evil person like Brandon. He was just a weak one who had made bad decisions under pressure. "Why didn't you fight for me?" I asked. "You knew what I had contributed to this company. You knew Brandon was incompetent. Why did you choose him over me?" "Because I was a coward," Robert admitted. "Brandon threatened to turn Jessica against me if I didn't support his decisions. He said I could choose between being a good CEO or being a good father-in-law, but I couldn't be both. I was afraid of losing my daughter, so I sacrificed everything else." The irony was heartbreaking. In trying to keep his family together, Robert had destroyed the company that was supposed to be his legacy. And from what I had heard, Jessica had divorced Brandon anyway once the scandal broke, and she realized what kind of man she had married. "What will you do now?" I asked. "I don't know," Robert said. I'm 64 years old, and I just destroyed the company I spent my whole career building. No one in the industry will hire me after this disaster. I'll probably end up retiring early and trying to rebuild some kind of relationship with my daughter. I left that meeting feeling strangely empty. My revenge was complete, but it didn't feel like the victory I had imagined. Robert was broken, Brandon was ruined, and TechFlow was destroyed. But seeing the human cost of my actions made me realize that revenge, even justified revenge, always comes with a price. That afternoon, I met with Dr. Chen at Quantum Dynamics. Her office was everything TechFlows had never been: modern, efficient, and filled with evidence of real innovation and success. She showed me the research facilities where I would work, introduced me to the team of brilliant engineers who would help develop my AI system, and explained her vision for how my technology could be used to solve real problems in the world. This isn't just about making money, Dr. Chen explained. Your AI system could help predict economic crashes before they happen, identify market manipulation, and level the playing field between big corporations and smaller investors. We could use it to make the financial world more fair and transparent. The offer was everything I had ever wanted: respect, recognition, unlimited resources, and the chance to make a real difference in the world. But I had one condition that surprised Dr. Chen. I want to hire some people, I said. There are former TechFlow employees who lost their jobs because of this scandal. Good people who didn't deserve to be punished for Brandon's mistakes. I want to offer them positions here, with full credit for their contributions and protection from corporate politics. Dr. Chen smiled and agreed immediately. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of in this industry. Consider it done. Over the next few months, I built something amazing at Quantum Dynamics. My AI system was improved and refined until it could predict market movements with 97% accuracy. We launched it properly, with my name prominently featured in all the marketing materials and press coverage. The system became the most successful product launch in Quantum Dynamics history, generating over $2 billion in revenue in its first year. But more importantly, I used my new platform to advocate for better treatment of employees in the tech industry. I spoke at conferences about the importance of recognizing and protecting innovation, regardless of who creates it. I mentored young engineers and scientists, especially women, helping them navigate corporate politics and protect their intellectual property. I also established the Rodriguez Foundation for Workplace Justice, using part of my earnings to provide legal assistance to employees who face situations similar to what I had experienced. The foundation helped dozens of people fight back against companies that tried to steal their work or fire them unfairly. 6 months after the TechFlow bankruptcy, I received a letter that brought the whole story full circle. It was from Brandon, who was apparently working at a small consulting firm in another state after being blacklisted from every major tech company. The letter was an apology, but it was clearly written by his lawyer and felt completely fake. I realize now that I made serious errors in judgment during my time at TechFlow. The letter read, I should have recognized your contributions to the AI project and treated you with the respect you deserved. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive my mistakes. I threw the letter away without finishing it. Some people deserve second chances, but Brandon wasn't one of them. He had shown his true character when he had power, and losing everything hadn't made him a better person. It had just made him a more careful one. The real closure came a year later, when I was invited to speak at my old university's graduation ceremony. As I stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of young faces full of hope and ambition, I thought about everything I had learned from my experience with TechFlow. Success isn't just about being smart or working hard, I told the graduates. It's about staying true to your values even when it's difficult, standing up for yourself when others try to diminish you, and remembering that kindness and strength aren't opposites. They're partners. I talked about the importance of protecting your work, building relationships based on mutual respect, and never letting anyone convince you that you're worth less than you know you are. But I also talked about forgiveness, not for the people who hurt you, but for yourself, so you can move forward without carrying the weight of anger and bitterness. The best revenge, I concluded, isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so successful and meaningful that their betrayal becomes just a small chapter in a much larger story of triumph. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She told me that her previous employer had stolen her research and fired her when she complained about it. She had been considering giving up on her career in science, but my story had inspired her to fight back. "What should I do?" she asked. I gave her Maria's business card and my personal phone number. "You should remember that they fired the wrong person," I said, "and then you should make them regret it." As I drove home that evening, I realized that my story was no longer about revenge or even justice. It had become about something much more important: the power of refusing to be erased, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the truth that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can become the foundation for the best thing you ever build: tech flow. Industries was gone, but the lessons from its destruction lived on in every person who heard my story and decided to fight for themselves. Brandon had thought he could steal my work and throw me away like garbage. Instead, he had created a symbol of resistance that would inspire people for years to come. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. They had tried to make me disappear, but instead they had made me unforgettable. They had fired the wrong person, and the whole world would remember why that was the biggest mistake they ever made.